I woke up at 3 a.m. to a strange noise coming from the backyard. I got up, confused, and went to my bedroom window. What I saw left me paralyzed. My son Marcus and my daughter-in-law Andrea were in my backyard with a flashlight in hand, burying something in the ground. Their movements were desperate, nervous, as if they were committing a crime. I stayed there, hidden behind the curtain, watching the two people I trusted most in the world doing something behind my back in the middle of the night. When they finished, they quickly covered the hole and snuck back into the house like thieves in the darkness. I waited until they left for work the next day. My heart hadn't stopped beating hard since I saw them. I grabbed a shovel and went directly to the place where they had dug. The dirt was loose, fresh. I began to dig with trembling hands, not knowing what the hell I was going to find. When I finally pulled out the buried object, I almost fainted from shock. I couldn't believe what I had in front of me. It was something that would change everything I thought I knew about my family, about my life, about the people I had loved and protected for decades. But to understand why what I found destroyed my soul, you need to know who I am. My name is Marshall Matthews. I'm 69 years old, and my whole life I've been the type of man who gives everything for his family. The type of man who sacrifices without asking for anything in return, who puts others' needs before his own. Marcus came into my life when he was only 3 years old. His mother had died in a car accident, and he was completely alone in the world. My heart broke when I first heard him at that orphanage, so small, so lost, so in need of love. My wife and I couldn't have biological children, so we decided to adopt him immediately. From that moment, Marcus became the center of my universe. I gave him all the love I had stored in my frustrated father's heart. I raised him as if he were my blood. I protected him from all harm. I educated him with the best values I could teach. I worked day and night to give him the best life possible. When he turned 18, I even put this ranch in his name, too, so he would feel completely part of the family. 3 years ago, he married Andrea. At first, I liked her. She was a polite, hard-working young woman who seemed to genuinely love my son. But over time, I began to notice strange things. Small, disrespectful comments about my age. Suggestions that maybe it was time for me to consider moving to a nursing home. Complicit glances with Marcus when they thought I wasn't watching. My wife died 5 years ago, and since then, I've lived alone in this house we built together. A beautiful ranch on the outskirts of town with 3 acres of land and a country house worth a fortune. During these years of widowhood, Marcus and Andrea began visiting me more frequently. At first, I thought it was because they worried about me, because they wanted to take care of their widowed father. How naive I was to believe their intentions were pure. Now, with what I found buried in my backyard, everything was beginning to make sense in the most painful way possible. During the past few weeks, I had noticed that Marcus seemed nervous, restless. Andrea also behaved strangely, as if they were planning something behind my back. I heard them whispering in the kitchen, and when I entered, they immediately changed the subject. I saw them reviewing papers that they quickly hid when I approached. That night, when I saw them burying something in the middle of the night, all the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in the most terrifying way possible. But what I found buried exceeded all my worst fears. When I pulled that object from the earth and saw what it really was, I understood that the two people I had trusted most in the world had betrayed me in the most vile and imaginable way. What I had in my hands was proof that everything I believed about my family was a lie. Everything I had built over decades was crumbling before me. And this was just the beginning of the nightmare that was to come. What I found buried in that hole were documents, but not just any kind of documents. They were papers I kept in my personal safe. Documents to which only I had access. Papers that should never have left my room. My original will, the ranch property deeds, my life insurance policy, and most disturbing of all, a letter I had written 2 years ago, addressed to a lawyer, where I expressed my suspicions about Marcus and Andrea's strange behavior. My own hands trembled when I recognized my handwriting in that letter. A letter I never sent, that I kept as a personal outlet, where I wrote about how I had begun to feel that Marcus no longer saw me as his father, but rather as an obstacle, as an old burden that stood between him and my inheritance. Now I understood everything. Marcus had violated my privacy, had opened my safe somehow, had read my most intimate thoughts, and had decided to bury the evidence so I could never prove his true intentions. He thought that if those documents disappeared, I would have no way to protect myself legally from whatever they were planning. But he made a fatal mistake. He didn't know I had copies of all those documents stored in a completely different place. He didn't know that during the past few months, sensing something was wrong, I had begun to take precautions. And he definitely didn't know about the secret bank account I had with over $200,000, proceeds from the sale of some properties I inherited from my sister last year. Marcus had always been intelligent, but he completely underestimated his adoptive father. He believed I was a foolish and trusting old man who would swallow any lie he told me. He was about to discover how wrong he was. The next day, when they arrived for lunch like every Sunday, I watched them with completely different eyes. I no longer saw my beloved son and his wife. I saw two predators who had been planning my destruction while I served them food with paternal love. Marcus sat at the table with that fake smile I now recognized perfectly. Andrea didn't even bother to disguise her contempt. She served herself the stew I had prepared with so much care, as if it were her right, as if I were her free domestic servant. "Dad," Marcus began with a honeyed voice, "Andrea and I have been thinking about your situation here at the ranch. This house is too big for someone your age alone. The maintenance expenses must be killing you financially." Andrea nodded with false concern. "Yes, Marshall. Besides, living so isolated isn't good for you. You should be near people your own age, in a place where you get the medical attention you need." Their words were like poisoned daggers. They spoke of my future as if I were a burden, as if my well-being were an inconvenience they had to solve. But most painful was the act, the way they pretended to worry about me when in reality they only wanted to get rid of me. "And what do you propose?" I asked with a calm voice, although inside I felt like I was drowning in rage and pain. Marcus exchanged a quick glance with Andrea before responding. "Well, we've looked at some very good retirement homes in the city, places where you could socialize, where you'd have activities, 24-hour medical care. And of course," Andrea added with that venomous smile, "we would take care of selling the ranch to pay for all those expenses. You wouldn't worry about anything financially ever again." There was their complete plan exposed without any shame. They wanted to commit me to a nursing home and keep my property. They wanted me to sell my home, the place where I had been happy with my wife, where I had raised Marcus, where I had all my most precious memories. "And what if I don't want to leave my house?" I asked, maintaining calm, although I felt my heart was going to jump out of my chest. Marcus's mask began to crack. His smile became tense, forced. "Dad, don't be stubborn. You're not a young man anymore. Accidents can happen. What if you fall and no one finds you for days? What if you have a health problem and you're completely alone?" Besides, Andrea intervened with a harder voice, "Maintaining this ranch is costing a fortune. The taxes, maintenance, utilities. Your widower's pension isn't enough for any of this. You're living beyond your means." It was incredible how they had calculated each argument to make me feel like an economic and emotional burden, as if my existence were a problem that needed immediate solution, as if doing what they wanted was the only logical option. "I need time to think," I finally told them. Marcus slammed his fist on the table, and for the first time I saw his true face. The face of a frustrated man because his victim wasn't behaving as he expected. "Time for what, Dad? To continue being stubborn? You're not 20 years old anymore. You can't make decisions as if you're going to live forever." "Marcus is right," Andrea added with a cutting voice. "At your age, important decisions should be made by younger people, more prepared people, people who really understand how finances and future planning work. Their words hit me like slaps. They were treating me as if I were a senile person incapable of taking care of my own life, as if my age was synonymous with mental incapacity, as if being older automatically took away my right to decide about my own future. But what hurt most was that it came from Marcus, the boy I had raised as my own son, to whom I had given all my love, all my effort, all my resources. The boy for whom I had sacrificed my youth, my time, my own dreams. That night after they left, I stayed awake until very late, going over every word of that conversation, every disrespectful gesture, every calculating look, every phrase designed to make me feel small and useless. It was then that I made the most important decision of my life. If they wanted to play dirty, I would teach them how to really play this game. But they had no idea who they were messing with. During the following days, Marcus and Andrea intensified their psychological campaign against me. It was as if they had interpreted my silence as weakness, as a sign that I was giving in to their demands. They had no idea that every poisonous word they said to me only strengthened my determination to destroy them completely. On Tuesday morning, Andrea arrived unannounced with some brochures in hand. She dropped them on my kitchen table, as if they were military orders I had to obey without question. "Look, Marshall. I've already done all the research for you. These are the 3 best places I found. They have activities for seniors, meals included, permanent medical service. They even have a beauty salon inside." She spoke of these geriatric prisons as if she were offering me a luxury resort vacation, as if locking me between 4 walls with other elderly people abandoned by their families was the grand prize I had been waiting for my whole life. "They're a bit expensive," she continued with false concern. "But don't worry about that. As soon as we sell the ranch, you'll have enough money to pay years in advance. In fact, there will be plenty left over for Marcus and me to help you with any extra expenses you might have." The shamelessness left me speechless. Not only did they want to steal my house, but they had the audacity to talk as if they were doing me a favor, as if keeping the money from the sale were a natural part of the process of taking care of me. "And where will you live meanwhile?" I asked with a neutral voice. Andrea smiled with that expression I already knew very well, the smile of someone who believes they've already won the game. "Well, obviously we'll stay here until the property is sold. Someone has to take care of the house, keep it presentable for potential buyers. Marcus is going to take time off work to dedicate himself completely to the sale. Of course, the perfect plan. Kick me out of my own house while they installed themselves as the new owners, live comfortably at my expense while I rotted in a nursing home paid for with my property's money. Besides," she added with a harder voice, "this house needs many repairs before it can be sold well. The roof has leaks, the siding is old, the garden is neglected. It's going to require a considerable investment to get it in condition." It was incredible how she had gone from feigning paternal concern to openly criticizing my home. The house I had kept impeccable for decades was now, according to her, a disaster that required her saving intervention. That night, Marcus arrived with a completely different attitude. He no longer pretended to be the loving son worried about his father. His mask had fallen completely. "Dad, enough making things difficult. Andrea and I have made a decision. Next week, you're going to visit the 3 places she selected, and you're going to choose one. It's not a suggestion. It's what's going to happen." His tone was that of someone giving orders to a rebellious employee. He didn't even bother to use sweet words or false arguments anymore. It was pure imposition, pure intimidation. "And if I refuse?" I asked, although the recorder was already running in my pocket. Marcus approached me with an expression that scared me. In his eyes I saw something I had never seen before: absolute contempt. Contempt for the man who had raised him, who had sacrificed everything for him. "You won't refuse, Dad. Because at your age, living alone in this big house, many accidents can happen. The stairs are dangerous for an older person. The floors can be slippery. Medications can be easily confused. His words were thinly veiled threat. He was telling me that if I didn't obey voluntarily, they would make sure something happened to me, that my accident would be the perfect excuse to take control of my life and assets. Besides, he continued with an icy voice, I've already talked to Dr. Oliver about your mental state. I told him that lately you've been showing signs of confusion, forgetfulness, making irrational decisions. He's very concerned about your ability to live independently. Dr. Oliver was the family doctor for years, a man who had always treated me with respect and affection. The idea that Marcus had lied to him about my mental state enraged me to levels I didn't know existed. You lied to Dr. Oliver about me? I asked with a voice trembling with rage. I didn't lie about anything. I told the truth about a 69-year-old man who refuses to accept the reality of his situation. A man who believes he can continue living as if he were 30. That's exactly the definition of mental deterioration. Andrea joined the attack with a cruel smile. Dr. Oliver completely agrees with us. He says it's very common in people your age: denial, stubbornness, inability to make rational decisions. He even mentioned we could get a court order if necessary. A court order? They wanted to have me declared mentally incompetent to take legal control of my asset. They wanted to use the judicial system to rob me of everything I had built during a lifetime of work and sacrifice. What retirement are you talking about? Andrea asked with sarcasm when I mentioned my income. You don't even have a decent pension. You live on Social Security and savings that are almost gone. What money do you think you can maintain this property with? It was lie after lie. My economic situation was solid, but they had built a complete narrative where I was a ruined and demented old man who needed to be saved from his own decisions. Dad, Marcus said with that condescending voice he used when treating me like a foolish child. We understand this is difficult for you, the emotional attachment to this house, the resistance to change, but that's why we're here to help you make the decisions you can't make alone. Exactly, Andrea added. We love you. That's why we're willing to sacrifice our time and energy to solve this problem. Other children would have simply called social services and washed their hands. They presented their robbery plan as an act of filial love, as if kicking me out of home and stealing my inheritance were the greatest sacrifice they could make for me, as if I should be grateful they were destroying my life with such consideration. That night after they left, I sat in the living room where I had spent the best moments of my life with my wife, where I had watched Marcus grow up, where I had celebrated each of his successes, where I had cried each of his sorrows as if they were mine. Now that same boy, transformed into a 35-year-old man, wanted to erase all those memories, wanted to convert my home into cash and me into a burden that needed to be deposited in the cheapest place possible. But I had a secret they didn't know, some trump cards that would completely change the game. And it was time to start playing. What Marcus and Andrea didn't know was that during the past 6 months, I had been taking precautions. Every strange conversation, every calculating look, every comment about my age had set off alarms in my head. That's why I had begun recording our conversations. I had a small recording device that my late wife had bought years ago for her business meetings. I had found it while going through her things and decided to keep it without imagining that someday I would need it to protect myself from my own son. During the past few weeks, every time Marcus and Andrea came to visit me, I discreetly activated the recorder. I had hours of audio where their plan to steal my house was perfectly clear. Their veiled threats, their lies about my mental state, and most importantly, their true feelings about me. But that wasn't all. The previous month, sensing something bad was approaching, I had visited a different lawyer from the one I had used all my life. One Marcus didn't know, in a neighboring city. I told him the whole situation, and he helped me protect my assets in the smartest way possible. First, I had secretly transferred half of my savings to a bank account at another bank under the name of a corporation the lawyer had created for me. Second, I had modified my will, leaving everything to a charitable foundation with the exception of a small sum for Marcus. Third, I had prepared a sworn statement detailing the threats and robbery plan they had been developing against me. I also had something else they had never suspected. 8 months ago, my younger sister had died childless, leaving me as the sole heir, a property in the capital worth more than $500,000. I had decided to keep this inheritance secret, sensing that someday I would need it as an escape card. That property was already being discreetly remodeled, a luxury apartment in the city center with 24-hour security, nearby medical services, and most importantly, far from Marcus and Andrea's clutches. On Friday morning, Marcus arrived with papers in hand and an even more aggressive attitude than the previous week. He no longer even pretended courtesy. He treated me as if I were a rebel who needed to be subdued by force. Dad, enough games. I brought the application forms for the 3 nursing homes. You're going to fill them out right now, and on Monday we start the visit. There's no more discussion. He threw the papers on the table as if they were my death sentence, forms that asked about my medical history, my income, my assets, my responsible family, everything designed to catalog me as a social burden that needed to be institutionalized. And if I refused to sign? I asked, although the recorder was already running in my pocket. Marcus approached me with an expression that chilled my blood. You won't refuse, Dad. Because if you do, tomorrow I'm calling social services and telling them about your mental deterioration, about how you refuse to eat, how you forget to take your medications, how you've started having hallucinations. Hallucinations? I asked incredulously. Yes, Dad. Like that time you told me you had seen Mom in the garden, or when you insisted I had been going through your things. Clearly psychotic behaviors that require immediate medical attention. It was brilliant. He was converting my moments of nostalgia for my dead wife and my justified suspicions about his behavior into symptoms of dementia. He was creating a false history of mental illness that he would use to take away all my right. Andrea entered the kitchen at that moment, as if they had coordinated their performance. Marshall, I already talked to the director of Hope Village. It's the nicest nursing home of the 3. It has gardens, recreational activities, even a beauty salon. You could move in next week if you wanted. Next week? I exclaimed. Yes, Marcus responded impatiently. We've already wasted too much time with your tantrums. Andrea and I have plans. We have a life to live. We can't keep wasting our weekends coming here to convince you of the obvious. There was the naked truth. I was an inconvenience that interrupted their life plans, a bothersome old man who stood between them and their comfort. They didn't even pretend to care about my well-being anymore. Besides, Andrea added cruelly, at Hope Village, you'll be with people your own age, people who understand what it's like to be old, what it's like to be good for nothing but getting in the way. Her words were like slaps. She was telling me directly that I was no longer good for anything, that my only function in life was to disappear quietly so as not to bother productive young people. Is this what I'm worth to you? I asked with a choked voice. An old man who's good for nothing but getting in the way? Marcus sighed with exasperation, as if it were exhausting having to explain reality to a foolish person. Dad, it's not about what you're worth. It's about being realistic. You're 69 years old. Your body isn't the same. Your mind isn't the same. It's natural that you need specialized help. The abnormal thing would be pretending you can continue living as if you were 40. And we have our own lives, Andrea added without the slightest trace of compassion. Marcus works 60 hours a week. I have my job and my responsibilities. We can't keep coming here every week to take care of someone who refuses to accept the help he needs. It was incredible how they had managed to turn the situation around. They, who came to rob my house, now presented themselves as sacrificed victims who wasted their time trying to help a stubborn and ungrateful old man. And what happens if I don't want to leave my house? I asked, emphasizing the word my. Marcus's reaction was explosive. He hit the table so hard the glasses jumped. Enough. I'm fed up with your whims. This house is too much for you. Period. The expenses are too much for your miserable pension. Period. Your mental health is deteriorating. Period. Either you sign these papers voluntarily, or I'll sign them with a court order declaring you incompetent. Marcus is right, Andrea intervened with an icy voice. We've been patient enough with you. Other children would have had you institutionalized by force months ago, but we're giving you the opportunity to do this with dignity. With dignity. They wanted me to thank them for robbing my house with dignity. They wanted me to celebrate the fact that they were destroying my life in a civilized manner. What if I tell you I don't have financial problems? I asked. What if I show you I can perfectly maintain this property? Marcus laughed sarcastically. With what money, Dad? Your bank account has less than $10,000. The taxes on this property are $4,000 annually. Basic maintenance costs at least $2,000 a year. Utilities another $200. Your pension is $800 monthly. Where's the math that allows you to maintain this? It was obvious he had been investigating my finances, probably illegally accessing my banking information, but he didn't know about my secret account, nor about my sister's inheritance, nor about the investments I had made with the lawyer. Dad, he said with that condescending voice I already hated with all my soul, we understand it's difficult to accept that you can no longer take care of yourself, but that's why we're here, to make the difficult decisions you can no longer make. That was the last straw. Seeing my adoptive son, whom I had raised with so much love, treating me as if I were a mental invalid gave me the strength I needed to execute my plan. All right, I said finally. You're right. Maybe it's time for me to retire definitively. Marcus and Andrea exchanged a triumphant smile. They thought I had finally given in, that they had broken my resistance. They had no idea I had just declared war on them. I'm retiring. It's definitive, I repeated with a firm voice, seeing how their faces lit up with malicious satisfaction. They thought they had won. They didn't know I had just activated the most devastating phase of my counterattack. That same afternoon, after they left celebrating their supposed victory, I called my lawyer. Jack, it's time to execute the plan. I want everything we prepared to be activated tomorrow. The next day, early in the morning, a moving company arrived at my house. They were discreet, professional, and in a few hours they packed all my most valuable belongings, my jewelry, my important documents, my family memories, everything that really mattered to me. They sent everything directly to my new apartment in the capital. Then I drove to the bank where I had my secret account, withdrew $50,000 in cash, the money I would need for the next few months while executing my revenge. Marcus and Andrea believed I was an old man without resources. They were about to discover how wrong they were. My new apartment in the capital was spectacular. 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, modern kitchen, balcony overlooking the city, 24-hour security, and most importantly, it was in my name under a corporation Marcus could never trace. It was my secret fortress, my base of operations for the war that was about to begin. On Monday morning, Marcus arrived at the ranch expecting to find me sadly packing my things to go to the nursing home. Instead, he found a note taped to the front door. Gone to reflect on my retirement. We'll return when ready. Don't look for me. According to my neighbor Yolanda, who told me later, Marcus went crazy. He screamed, cursed, called my phone desperately trying to locate me. Andrea came running, and together they searched the entire house looking for clues about my whereabouts. What they didn't find was my new will, my legal documentation, or my recordings. Everything was safe in my secret apartment. What they did find was the house completely empty of my valuable belongings and a bank account with exactly $200, the minimum I had left so they wouldn't suspect I had other resources. For 3 days, Marcus called me obsessively on my cell phone, at first with that sweet and worried voice he used when he wanted to manipulate me. Dad, we're very worried. Where are you? Are you okay? Come home. We can talk about all of this. When I didn't respond to those calls, the tone changed radically. The voicemails became aggressive, threatening. Dad, this is ridiculous. You're a 69-year-old man. You can't be wandering around like a rebellious teenager. Come back immediately, or we're calling the police. On the fourth day, I decided to answer one of his calls. My voice sounded tired, defeated, exactly as I wanted it to sound. Marcus, son, you're right. I can't keep running from reality. I'm in a cheap hotel here in town, spending the few savings I have left. I can't take it anymore. What hotel are you at? We'll come get you right now, he responded with relief. No, don't come. Tomorrow I'll return to the ranch, but I need you to promise me something. I need one more week to say goodbye to my house, to emotionally process what's happening. 1 week, and then I'll sign all the papers you want. Marcus agreed immediately. 1 week seemed like a very small price to pay to finally get what he wanted. He didn't know that week would be enough to completely destroy his life. On Friday, I returned to the ranch, but not alone. I arrived in a luxury taxi, dressed in expensive clothes I had bought in the capital, with my hair professionally styled, and with a completely different attitude. I was no longer the defeated old man they had been humiliating for months. Marcus and Andrea were waiting for me in the living room with the nursing home papers ready on the table. Their triumphant expressions disappeared when they saw me enter. Something in my posture, in my energy, told them something had fundamentally changed. Dad, you look different, Marcus said with some suspicion. I feel different, I replied with a smile I hadn't shown in months. I had time to think, to reflect on my life, on my decisions, on the people who really love me. Andrea frowned. What do you mean by that? I mean that during these days, I remembered something very important. I remembered who I really am. I'm not the useless and broken old man you want me to believe I am. I'm Marshall Matthews, owner of 2 properties with a solid bank account and a network of contacts you can't even imagine. I saw how their faces paled as they processed my words. Marcus stood up abruptly. What are you talking about? What 2 properties? What solid bank account? I took from my wallet a document I had prepared especially for this moment. It was the property deed for my apartment in the capital, completely paid for, valued at $500,000. This property I inherited from my sister 8 months ago. I thought maybe I should mention it to my dear adoptive son, but then I remembered he's so busy planning how to rob my house. He probably wouldn't be interested in knowing about my other assets. The word adoptive hit them like a slap. Marcus was paralyzed, processing the fact that I knew about the documents he had buried, about his attempt to hide his true legal status in the family. How do you know about this? He stammered. About your adoption? I always knew, dear. I was the one who adopted you. Remember? What I didn't know was that you had found the original documents and had decided to bury them in my backyard so I couldn't use them legally against you. Andrea stood up as if she had seen a ghost. That's impossible. Those documents are buried. No, not anymore. I dug them up the same night I saw you hiding them. And not only that, I photographed them, scanned them, sent them to my lawyer, and stored them in a safety deposit box along with recordings of all our conversations from the past few weeks. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus and Andrea looked at each other with absolute panic, finally understanding that their victim had proven much more intelligent and prepared than they had ever imagined. Recordings, Marcus whispered with a choked voice. Recordings where you threaten to cause me accidents if I don't obey. Recordings where you plan to steal my house. Recordings where you insult me, humiliate me, and treat me like trash. Recordings where Andrea says I'm no longer good for anything but getting in the way. I saw how the reality of their situation began to penetrate their brains. They had completely underestimated their victim, and now all their poisonous words, all their threats, all their criminal plans were legally documented. Dad, can we explain everything? It wasn't our intention, Marcus began desperately. It wasn't your intention to rob me, threaten me, lie to Dr. Oliver about my mental health, plan to have me declared incompetent to take control of my assets? Each question was a direct stab to the heart of their criminal plan. I knew exactly everything they had done, everything they had planned, and had the evidence to prove it. Andrea tried one last desperate resort. Marshall, you don't understand. We only wanted to help you. Everything we did was for your own good. I laughed with a laugh that hadn't come from my throat in months, a genuine, liberating, powerful laugh. For my own good? Stealing my house is for my own good. Locking me in a nursing home against my will is for my own good. Lying about my mental health is for my own good. Marcus tried to approach me, but something in my expression stopped him abruptly. I'm no longer the same man you thought you could manipulate, I said with a steel voice. Now I'm your nightmare, our nightmare. Dad, you're exaggerating all of this, Marcus said, trying to regain control of the situation, but his voice trembled. Sit down. Let's talk like civilized adults. Civilized adults? I repeated with irony. Like when you threatened me with accidents on the stairs. Or like when your wife told me I'm no longer good for anything but getting in the way. I took out my phone and pressed play on one of the recordings. Marcus's voice filled the room. At your age, living alone in this big house, many accidents can happen. The stairs are dangerous for an older person. I saw how Marcus collapsed on the couch, hearing his own threatening words reproduced with perfect clarity. Andrea turned pale as paper. Should I continue? I asked with a smile that made them tremble. I pressed play again. This time it was Andrea's voice. You'll be with people your own age, people who understand what it's like to be old, what it's like to be good for nothing but getting in the way. This is illegal, Andrea stammered. You can't record private conversations without our consent. Illegal? I laughed. Dear, I'm in my own house. I can record everything I want. But you know what is illegal? Threatening an elderly person, planning to steal their property, lying to a doctor to falsely declare someone as mentally incompetent. Marcus stood up abruptly. His mask of loving son had disappeared completely. What do you want? Money? That's it. Tell us how much you want to forget all of this. Money! I exclaimed with incredulity. You believe that after everything you've done, after all the humiliations, after planning to rob my house, you believe this is resolved with money? Andrea tried another approach. Marshall, we're family. Families forgive each other, overcome problems together. We can't destroy ourselves over a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? I repeated with an icy voice. Planning to have me declared mentally incompetent is a misunderstanding. Threatening me with physical accidents is a misunderstanding. I took another document from my wallet. It was a copy of the report my lawyer had prepared detailing all the legal elements of elder abuse that Marcus and Andrea had committed. This document is already in the hands of the prosecutor. Psychological abuse against an elderly person, threats of violence, conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted illegal appropriation of asset. Do you know how many years in prison these crimes carry? Marcus collapsed completely. Dad, please. I'm your son. You raised me, loved me. You can't do this. My son. I asked with a choked but firm voice. My son would never have threatened me. My son would never have planned to rob me. My son would never have treated me like trash. You're not my son. You're a stranger who lived in my house for 30 years pretending to love me. The words came from the deepest part of my pain. Each syllable loaded with years of unrequited love, unappreciated sacrifices, silent humiliations. You raised a monster that turned against you, I added, looking him directly in the eyes. A monster that saw his adoptive father as a walking bank account. Andrea tried to recover lost ground. All right. Maybe we were wrong in how we approach things, but we can fix it. We can go to family therapy. Family therapy? I interrupted her. For what? So a psychologist can explain to me why my son wants to steal my house? So they can teach me to better accept threats of physical violence. I walked to the window from where I had seen them burying the documents that fateful night. Everything had started there, with that image of betrayal that had been forever burned into my retina. Do you know what's the most painful thing about all this? I asked without turning around. It's not that you want to steal my money. It's not that you want the house. It's that you never really loved me. For 30 years, you pretended to love me while waiting for me to die to inherit my assets. That's not true, Marcus protested weakly. I turned to him with an expression that made him step back. It's not true? Then explain to me why you never visit me out of love, only when you need something. Explain to me why all your conversations revolve around my age, my limitations, my uselessness. Explain to me why your first reaction when I told you I was alone was to think about how to take advantage of my vulnerability. The silence that followed was devastating. They had no answers because they knew every word I had said was absolutely true. Besides, I continued with a harder voice, there's something else you don't know. Dr. Oliver never believed your lies about my mental state. I saw how Marcus paled, understanding the implications. That's right. I went to see him personally. I showed him the recordings where you planned to use your lies to have me declared incompetent. He's furious, a respected doctor whose professional reputation you wanted to use to validate your criminal lies. Marcus stood up, staggering. What did you tell him? The truth. That my adoptive son and his wife have been planning legal fraud using his name and reputation. That you lied about my mental health to get false medical documentation you would use in court. Dr. Oliver had indeed been furious when I told him everything, not only because of the lies, but because they had tried to make him an unwitting accomplice to legal fraud. Dr. Oliver has already filed a report correcting all the false information you gave him, I continued. And besides that, he provided a complete medical evaluation confirming that I am perfectly capable, mentally and physically, of managing my own affairs. Andrea began to cry, but they weren't tears of repentance. They were tears of panic as she realized all their lies were crumbling simultaneously. Marshall, please. Can we fix this? Can we give you everything back? Give me back what? I interrupted her. Are you going to give me back the dignity you took from me? Are you going to give me back the nights of sleep I lost worrying about your threats? Are you going to give me back the trust one had in my family? I approached the table where the nursing home forms they had brought still lay. I picked them up and tore them into small pieces in front of their eyes. This is what I think of your plans to lock me in a nursing home, I said as the paper pieces fell to the floor. And this is what I think of you as family. Marcus tried one last desperate resort. Dad, I'm your son. You adopted me when I was 3 years old. You raised me, educated me, loved me. All of this has to mean something. It meant everything to me, I replied with a choked but firm voice. That's why it hurts so much. Because I really loved you as my own son. Because I would have given my life for you without hesitation. Because every success of yours I felt as mine. Every pain of yours hurt me more than if it were my own. I saw how my words hit him like punches. But you turned that love into weakness. You used my paternal affection to manipulate me. You interpreted my generosity as stupidity. And worse still, you interpreted my age as opportunity. It's not like that, Dad. I swear it's not like that, he pleaded. It's not like that? Then explain this recording to me, I said, pressing play once more. This time it was Marcus's voice saying, Andrea, when the old man dies, we're going to be rich. This property is worth a fortune. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus collapsed as if he had been shot in the chest. I recorded this conversation a month ago when you thought I was taking my afternoon nap. You were in the kitchen planning my death, as if it were a convenient financial event. The devastation on their faces hearing this final recording was absolute. Marcus covered his face with his hands, knowing there was no possible escape. Andrea sobbed, but not from repentance, but from pure panic, realizing their future had just collapsed. "Please, Dad," Marcus implored. "Can we explain? We were speaking hypothetically. We didn't mean." "Hypothetically?" I interrupted him with a steel voice. "Planning my death to keep my inheritance is speaking hypothetically? Referring to me as the old man is a term of endearment." I took out my phone again and dialed a number I'd been waiting to use for weeks. "Jack, it's Marshall." "Yes, I already have the confessions we needed. Activate everything immediately." Marcus jumped up. "Who are you talking to?" "My lawyer. The one you've been looking for during weeks without finding. The one who has legally documented each of your crimes." I hung up the phone and looked at them with a smile that made them tremble. At this moment, 3 legal processes are being simultaneously activated against you. First, civil action for psychological abuse and threats against an elderly person. Second, criminal complaint for conspiracy to commit fraud and illegal appropriation of asset. Third, restraining order that prohibits you from approaching me or my property. I saw how the color completely disappeared from their faces. "But that's not all," I continued, enjoying every second of their terror. "I also filed a lawsuit against you for defamation, specifically for the lies you told Dr. Oliver about my mental state." Andrea stood up, staggering. "This is crazy. You can't destroy our lives over a family misunderstanding." "Family misunderstanding?" I repeated with incredulity. "Threatening to kill me is a family misunderstanding? Planning to steal my inheritance is a minor domestic problem." Marcus tried to approach me, but something in my expression stopped him. "Dad, please. I'm all you have. Without me, you'll be completely alone." His words hit me, but not in the way he expected. They hurt because they revealed how little he really knew me. "Alone?" I laughed with a laugh that sounded liberated. "You think being away from people who hate me and want to rob me is being alone? For the first time in years, I feel accompanied by my dignity, by my self-respect, by my strength. Besides," I added, taking out another document, "I'm not alone at all. I have real friends, people who genuinely appreciate me, people who never saw my age as a business opportunity." The document was a letter of recommendation from the book club I had started attending in the capital, people my age who had become true friends, who valued my company without ulterior motive. "Do you know what the difference is between my real friends and you?" I asked. "They're happy when I arrive. You're happy when I leave. They enjoy my company. You endure my existence. They see me as a valuable person. You see me as a walking bank account." Marcus collapsed on the couch, finally understanding he had lost all control over the situation. "What do you want us to do?" he asked with a defeated voice. "What do I want you to do?" I repeated thoughtfully. "I want you to leave my house immediately and never return. I want you to return the copies of the keys you have. I want you to remove all your belongings before noon." "And then?" Andrea asked with a choked voice. "Then you're going to face the legal consequences of your actions. You're going to explain to a judge why you threatened a 69-year-old man. You're going to explain to a prosecutor why you planned to steal my property. You're going to explain to a jury why you considered my death as a financial opportunity." I saw how the reality of their situation began to completely penetrate their brains. There was no escape, no negotiation, no way to turn this into a family misunderstanding. "But there's something more," I added with a smile that made them pale even more. "My new friends from the book club include a retired journalist from the main newspaper in the capital. She found your story absolutely fascinating." Marcus jumped up. "What do you mean?" "I mean the story of an adoptive son who threatens and plans to rob his adoptive father is going to be front-page news next Sunday. The son who wanted to kill the father who saved him from the orphanage has a very attractive title. Don't you think?" Andrea began to hyperventilate. "You can't do this. Marcus has a job, a reputation. I work at a school. This will destroy our careers. Your careers? I exclaimed with false surprise. You're worried about your careers? You weren't worried about my life when you were planning my accidents. You weren't worried about my well-being when you were planning to lock me in a nursing home against my will. Marcus tried one last desperate resort. Dad, we can leave the country. We can disappear and never bother you again. But please don't destroy our lives publicly. Leave the country? I laughed. As fugitives? That's your great solution. Flee like criminals. Please, Andrea begged. We are young. We can change. We can learn from this. Young. I repeated with irony. Marcus is 35. You're 32. You're not teenagers who committed a prank. You're adults who systematically planned the robbery and abuse of an elderly man. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. You have exactly 5 minutes to leave my property. If you don't do it voluntarily, I'll call the police and have you arrested for trespassing. Marcus approached me with tears in his eyes. Dad, you raised me. I loved you. No, I interrupted him with a firm voice. I raised you. I loved you. You pretended to love me while waiting for me to die to inherit my assets. There's a fundamental difference. Please, one last chance, he pleaded. One last chance for what? To threaten me more subtly? To rob me more discreetly? To plan my death more carefully? Andrea tried to hug me, but I immediately stepped back. Don't touch me. You don't have the right to touch me. You lost that right when you decided to see my body as an obstacle between you and my money. Marcus collected the nursing home papers I had torn and looked at them with despair, as if they were his last connection to the plan that had crumbled. Do you know what's the most ironic thing about all this? I asked as I watched them collect their things. If you had simply loved me genuinely, if you had treated me with respect and affection, I would have left you everything voluntarily when I died. But your greed blinded you so much that you destroyed the only thing that could have given you what you wanted. The truth of those words hit them like a hammer. They realized their own avarice had destroyed the possibility of legitimately getting what they so desired. Now, I said, looking at my watch, you have 3½ minutes to leave my property before I call the police. I watched them leave my house like the criminals they were, dragging their belongings and their destroyed dignity. When Marcus turned to look at me one last time from the door, what he saw in my eyes made him understand that the man who had raised, loved, and protected him for 30 years had died to him forever. Goodbye, Marcus, I said with a final voice. May you have the life you deserve. And I closed the door. A week later, Marcus tried his last desperate resort. Since he could no longer contact me directly due to the restraining order, he decided to do something that definitively demonstrated he had learned nothing from everything that had happened. He created a profile on a social media platform and began live streaming, trying to manipulate public opinion. My neighbor Yolanda called me terrified. Marshall, you have to see this. Marcus is live on the internet saying horrible things about you. I logged in from my apartment in the capital and couldn't believe what I was seeing. There he was, sitting in what looked like a cheap apartment with red eyes from crying, speaking in front of the camera with a choked voice. My adoptive father has gone crazy, he said with fake tears streaming down his cheeks. The man who raised me, who loved me for 30 years, now accuses me of terrible things I never did. His age is affecting his mind, and he doesn't recognize reality. The live comments began filling with support messages. Poor guy. Elderly people sometimes become paranoid. It must be very painful to see your father in that state. Marcus continued with his perfect performance. Andrea and I only wanted to help him. We saw that he could no longer take care of himself in that big house, that he was spending money he didn't have to maintain a property that was physically beyond him. We only wanted him to be safe, cared for by specialized people. But when we suggested some options for places where he could be better, he interpreted everything as if we were criminals. Now he says we threatened, that we want to steal, that we plan to hurt him. It's heartbreaking to see how his mind is fabricating these paranoid fantasies. The comments multiplied. Your father is sick, son. Senile dementia is terrible. You should seek medical help for him. Marcus continued feeding the narrative. The worst part is that now he has lawyers who are taking advantage of his mental confusion, unscrupulous people who are filling him with ideas about legal processes and lawsuit. They're exploiting a vulnerable elderly man to get money from him. It was a masterful performance, every word calculated to present himself as the innocent victim of a senile father and corrupt lawyers, every tear perfectly timed to generate compassion. If anyone knows my father, Marshall Matthews, please tell him that I love him, that I will always love him, no matter what his illness makes him believe about me. That I'm here waiting for the day when he recovers his lucidity and can go back to being the caring father he always was. The comments were overwhelmingly sympathetic. You're a wonderful son. Your father is very lucky to have you. Don't give up. Love always wins. It was then that I decided it was time to enter the game. I created my own profile on the same platform and started my own live stream. In less than 5 minutes, several of Marcus' followers had found my stream, and comments began arriving. Hello, I said with a calm and clear voice. My name is Marshall Matthews. I'm the senile father Marcus talks about in his broadcast, and I have some things to show you. The comments exploded immediately. It's him, the crazy father. Poor thing. He doesn't know what he's saying. First, I continued with a firm voice, I want you to know I'm perfectly sane. I have here a medical certificate from Dr. Oliver dated last week confirming I'm mentally and physically capable of managing all my affairs. I held the document in front of the camera so they could see the official seal. Second, I want to play for you some recordings of conversations I had with my dear adoptive son so you can judge for yourselves who's telling the truth. I pressed play on the first recording. Marcus's voice filled the broadcast. At your age, living alone in this big house, many accidents can happen. The stairs are dangerous for an older person. The comments changed immediately. What was that? That sounded like a threat. Wait, is he threatening his father? That was a direct threat. I explained calmly. Now listen to this other one. I played the recording where Marcus said, when the old man dies, we're going to be rich. This property is worth a fortune. The chaos in the comments was deafening. Then completely different messages began appearing. My God, what a horrible son. He was planning to rob him. I have hours of recordings like these, I continued. Conversations where they plan to have me declared mentally incompetent, where they discuss how to sell my property, where they refer to me as the old man and plan my death as a convenient financial event. And the comments became an avalanche of indignation against Marcus. What a monster! Poor sir, how can he do this to his own father? But that's not all, I added. I also have this. I showed in front of the camera the photographs of the documents Marcus had buried in my backyard. These are photos of legal documents my son stole from my personal safe and buried in my backyard at 3 a.m., documents he planned to use to have me declared incompetent and take control of my assets. The comments were furious. Call the police now. That guy is a criminal. Poor man, what a nightmare. And finally, I said with a smile, I want to show you something Marcus doesn't know I have. I held in front of the camera the property deed for my apartment in the capital. This is a property I inherited 8 months ago worth $500,000. Music. Marcus didn't know about this inheritance when he was planning to steal my main house. It turns out the senile old man who can't take care of himself owns 2 properties and has a bank account he never imagined. The comments exploded. What a plot twist. The gentleman is smarter than his son. Marcus is an idiot besides being a criminal. Oh, I added casually, and I'm also partial owner of 3 local businesses I bought with part of my inheritance. It turns out this poor old man who needed to be locked in a nursing home has assets exceeding $1 million. The broadcast went viral in real time. Comments were coming so fast it was impossible to read them, but the tone was unanimously supportive of me and condemning Marcus. To finish, I said, looking directly at the camera, I want to send a message to my dear adoptive son who is certainly watching this. Marcus, you said your father had gone crazy. You were right, I went crazy allowing for 30 years to be disrespected. I went crazy sacrificing my well-being for someone who only saw my death as a business opportunity. I made a dramatic pause. But now I've recovered my sanity. And with this sanity comes the determination to ensure you face all the legal consequences of your actions. The documents I presented to the prosecutor include all these recordings. Monday morning, you'll be arrested for elder abuse, threats of violence, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The comments were a celebration. Justice, let them arrest him. You're a warrior, Marshall. To everyone watching, I continued, I want you to know that we elderly are not helpless victims waiting to be exploited. We can be intelligent, prepared, and when necessary, we can be absolutely ruthless defending our dignity. I ended the broadcast with over 50,000 viewers and thousands of supportive comments. In less than an hour, clips from my broadcast were being shared across all social media. Marcus had tried to destroy my reputation publicly but had achieved exactly the opposite. His own broadcast became a source of mockery. The comments on his video were now completely different. Liar. Your father destroyed you. What a shame. Marcus had lost the digital war spectacularly. His attempt to manipulate public opinion had become his most absolute humiliation. On Monday morning, exactly as I had promised in my viral broadcast, Marcus was arrested at his apartment. The images appeared on all local news. The son who had tried to steal from and abuse his adoptive father being handcuffed while neighbors looked at him with contempt. Andrea was also arrested at her workplace. The school where she taught suspended her immediately when they learned of the charges. A teacher accused of planning elder abuse wasn't exactly the image they wanted to project. But the real justice came 3 months later. During the public trial, the prosecutor had built an overwhelming case using all my recordings, the buried documents, Dr. Oliver's testimony, and the documented lies they had told about my mental state. The day I testified was the most satisfying moment of this entire nightmare. I entered that courtroom dressed in an elegant navy suit I had bought especially for the occasion, carrying a briefcase with all the evidence of my real assets, and with my dignity completely restored. Marcus sat at the defendant's table, unrecognizable from the man who had believed he controlled my life. He had lost weight, had deep circles under his eyes, and his cheap suit couldn't hide the desperation he radiated. When the prosecutor asked me to relate the facts, I spoke with a clear and firm voice. Every word I said resonated in that room like a hammer of justice. For months, the defendants developed a systematic plan to strip me of my assets and freedom. I began. They used my age as a pretext to treat me as if I were mentally incapable, threatened my physical integrity, lied to medical professionals to obtain false documentation, and planned my death as if it were a convenient financial event. The jury listened with growing horror as the recordings were played. Marcus's voice saying, "When the old man dies, we're going to be rich," resonated in that room like an absolute confession of guilt. When it was the defense attorney's turn to interrogate me, he tried to paint me as a vindictive man who had misinterpreted his son's caring intentions. "Mr. Matthews," he asked me with a condescending tone, "isn't it possible you misinterpreted your son's legitimate concerns about your well-being?" My response was devastating. "Counselor, when someone plans your death to inherit your assets, when they threaten you with physical accidents, when they steal legal documents from your personal safe, when they lie to doctors about your mental state, when they refer to you as the old man who should die soon, there's no possible misinterpretation. There's criminal planning." The attorney tried another angle. Don't you consider that perhaps your son was only concerned because you, at 69, live alone on a large property? My age is not a disability, I replied with a firm voice. And my ability to live independently is medically documented. But more importantly, my financial capacity to maintain my lifestyle is more than proven. It was then that the prosecutor asked me to reveal my true economic situation. With great satisfaction, I presented to the court all the documents proving my real asset. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I said, addressing the jury. Besides the ranch the defendants wanted to steal from me, I own an apartment in the capital valued at $500,000. I have bank accounts totaling $300,000, and I'm a partial partner in 3 businesses that generate monthly income of $4,000. The silence in the room was total. Marcus collapsed in his chair, hearing numbers he had never imagined. The defendants, I continued, planned to rob a man they believed was vulnerable and without resources. In reality, they tried to defraud someone whose assets exceed $1.5 million. Their criminal incompetence is as evident as their lack of moral scruples. The verdict was unanimous and quick. Marcus was sentenced to 5 years in prison for elder abuse, threats of violence, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Andrea received 3 years for complicity. Both were ordered to pay $200,000 in compensation for psychological damages and defamation. But the real justice came afterward when their lives completely collapsed. Marcus lost his job when his employer learned of the criminal charges. Nobody wants to hire someone convicted of abusing their own adoptive father. Andrea not only lost her job as a teacher but was placed on a list prohibiting her from working with minors or elderly people. Her educational career ended forever. The cheap apartment where they lived was foreclosed when they couldn't pay the mortgage without their jobs. Their few friends abandoned them when the story went viral. Even their own families were ashamed to be associated with them. Meanwhile, I flourished in my new life. My apartment in the capital became my perfect refuge. I had respectful neighbors, first-class medical services, infinite cultural activities, and most importantly, absolute peace. I joined 3 different clubs, one for reading, one for gardening, and one for financial investments. I met wonderful people who genuinely valued my company without ulterior motives. With money I had kept secret, I decided to completely remodel my original ranch. I converted it into a guest house for elderly people who had been abandoned by their families, a place where people like me could live with dignity, respect, and genuine affection. The irony was perfect. The house Marcus had wanted to steal from me became a refuge for victims of family abuse, a place where no one would be treated as a burden or nuisance. 6 months after the trial, I received a letter from prison. It was from Marcus, of course, a pathetic letter full of pleas and false apologies. "Dear Dad," it began, "I've had a lot of time to reflect on my mistake. I realize I misinterpreted the situation, that maybe I was too insistent about your moving, but everything came from love, from the desire to protect you." Every line was more manipulative than the last. He was trying to rewrite history, convert his criminal threats into family misunderstandings. "I know you can find in your heart forgiveness for your son who made mistakes but who always loved you. When I get out of here, I want to rebuild our relationship. I want to show that I'm the son I deserve to be." The letter ended with a desperate plea. "Please visit me. I need to see you. I need you to know that all this was a terrible misunderstanding we can overcome together." My response was simple and definitive. I sent him a single line: "Monsters don't deserve second chances." I never had contact with him again. Now, a year after that night when I saw them burying documents in my backyard, I lived the fullest and most satisfying life I've had in decades. I have real friends, projects that excite me, financial security, and something I hadn't had in years: absolute respect for myself. My guest house shelters 12 older adults who had been mistreated by their families. Each story is different, but they all share the same thread: children, grandchildren, or relatives who saw their age as opportunity instead of wisdom. I learned something fundamental during this experience. True love doesn't require us to destroy ourselves for others. Kindness doesn't mean allowing abuse. And protecting yourself isn't selfishness, it's survival. I don't regret adopting Marcus. I only regret not understanding sooner that kindness should never be practiced at the cost of self-destruction, that giving love doesn't mean giving away dignity, and that being a father doesn't mean being a victim. Today I'm 70 years old, and I've never felt more powerful, more respected, more alive. Marcus believed my age was my weakness. It turned out to be my most devastating strength, because an elderly man who has nothing left to lose is the most dangerous force in the universe. If you liked my story, you can support me by leaving a super thanks. That way I can write many other stories like this one. Thank you very much in advance. And you, what would you do in this person's place? I really want to know your opinion, so write here in the comments. I'm always curious to know what you think. Oh, and tell me also where you heard this story. If you want to hear more life stories like this, like the video and subscribe. There are many others waiting for you. A big hug, and until next time.